Hello and welcome. Thanks to everyone for joining us today for this virtual artist talk for the He Said, She Said Artsy exclusive exhibition. The recording will be available for reviewing. I will eventually post it on YouTube when I get around to it. So again, thank you for joining us. My name is Ellen Sturm Niz, and I'm the director of Amos Eno Gallery in New York. For those of you who aren't familiar with our gallery, we are a nonprofit artist-run space that started back in 1974. In addition to supporting our member artists with solo shows and group exhibitions, we want to support other artists by providing a platform for them to showcase their work. And we do that through open calls for art and invitations to show, both in person at the gallery and online, like in this artsy exhibition. I had the pleasure of curating this show, and I chose the theme of He Said, She Said in response to personal and public conversations happening around the themes of communication, gender dynamics, memory, and the nuances of truth. The works chosen for this exhibition circle around this common phrase of he said, she said, as a means of exploring how communication can simultaneously connect and divide us, particularly when considering gendered expectations, subjective realities, and cultural biases. So let's get talking with the artists. I'm also going to drop the links to the artsy exhibition and our Amos Eno website into the chat. So the first artist we're going to speak with today is Nicole. Hi, Nicole.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm glad you could
Thank
join
you.
us.
Thank
Um,
you.
so why don't you tell us about this work, Oyster?
For sure. My name is Nicole Melnicki, and I'm a contemporary artist based out of Vancouver, British Columbia. And I received my BFA at Moore College of Art and Design, and then I went for my MFA at OCAD. So in this piece, Oyster, I was specifically exploring the idea of body in the idea of non-binary and trans expression. So this piece actually challenges the notions of labeling and putting boxes around gender, and then actually reestablishing and transforming what those, gendered labels are, especially amongst, binary and trans expressions. It no longer really finds a category of female or male representation. And so through this work, I really wanted to express a more natural and organic expression of both sexuality and gender, and what that actually, looks like through communication. So this work has a spiritual essence, and speaks more towards, the nuances that are found in gender and expression.
Is alcohol ink a medium that you use frequently, or what made you choose that for this piece?
So most of my work is in acrylics, and I work on large scale raw canvas panels. And then I wanted to explore a different, more liquid and fluid medium. So I started exploring alcohol inks and working with different mediums and aesthetics. And I ideally made this to have it displayed backlit with a light box. So through this exploration, I really found there was like a strong connection between fluidity of the alcohol inks and connecting to sexuality. So my work is very akin to artists Eva Hess and artists like Jenny Saville, where they're expressing this body in this like larger than life expression. And so that's really why I started exploring alcoholics in my work. My work also takes form in sculpture, fashion, and installation. And so currently I'm working on a new series of artworks in my collection called As I Rise. And as I rise is this transformation of who you were as a past person and embracing those experiences that may have caused you pain or wounding and overcoming them and actually allowing yourself to become liberated through those experiences. And so it's supposed to inspire others, from whatever walks of life or backgrounds, and to look at their past and then also look at who they are now, from those past experiences. So my perspective is as a queer artist. And so I create a lot of works, expressing this idea of, the internal and external body and how that relates to femininity and sexuality, as well as queer pride.
That's great. I look forward to seeing that new series. Does anyone have any questions for Nicole about this work or any of her other work?
So, Nicole, my question is, you said you have this on a light box, which I find is just fascinating. And now I'm trying to see what are the dimensions of that, because where do you incorporate light boxes in your work a lot? And do you find any challenges in galleries to be able to actually plug them in?
Right. So this work is at 11 by 14 inches, but some of my other alcohol ink paintings, can span quite large. So it sometimes there are challenges, finding the appropriate light box and finding technology, but usually I'm able to install it, and I work with both the curator and the installation team to get it all set up appropriately. Yeah, the light boxes, really enhance the piece, and in a way it almost makes it appear digital, and it has this like utopic, otherworldly perspective, which I really try to enhance in my work. Yeah, so far, I've been able to make everything work, working around challenges and also, thinking about creative ways to display the works.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have a raised hand from Abu.
Hello, my name is Abu Khara. First of all, I just want to say, Nicole, your art looks amazing.
Thank
And I just wanted
you.
to ask you, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Like, how many genders does the art really showcase?
Well, I don't really want to be specific, with one gender or the other. And I want to express this nuanced expression of femininity and masculinity, because both, every individual both has feminine energy as well as masculine energy. And this is expressed in different ways. And if you do research, this feminine and masculine energy is both found in the yin and yang, and it's a perfect harmonious balance of energy that any individual expresses, whether they're female presenting or male presenting. And so I'm particularly interested in representing individuals who identify as trans or non-binary, and throughout their lives they've really had to dig deep and find out what is their best representation of gender. And so that's why I'm interested in representing this group, this minority.
This minority. Okay. Sounds good, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Nicole, for joining us today. Your work is amazing, and I'm glad we got to share it with everyone. I know you need to run, so
Yes.
Good luck with the rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
All right, next we're going to move on to Effie. Yeah, so Effie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
My piece focuses actually on the linguistic side and how it affects communication and misunderstanding. It's about linguistic dualities, languages that create conflicting narrative, situations that without context or clues, you don't know the meaning, and how it creates ambiguity in communication. This phenomena, by the way, of dual meanings to the same thing actually has a name, and it's called homographs. And to give you an example, what kind of words are homographs? There's bat, bow, ring, nail, bank, cane, fair, park. One word that can have two different meanings, but in this series, actually, I'm exploring the gap and the tension that arises from dual meanings. And the specific case, it's the dual meaning of pomegranate and grenade, which in about 30 or 40 European and non-European language, it's the same word. Pomegranate is also a grenade, a hand grenade. So you can imagine that it's a question of context. You can say to somebody, throw me a pomegranate, and you don't know what you're going to get. So this word pomegranate entered the English language around the 16th century, and it's because it's the similarity and how it looks, the pomegranate, to the hand grenade and the sharpnel. This work is from a series, and it's called Blown Away by a Namesake. So it deals, like a lot of my other art, language, objects, and imagery, how they shape the narratives and that we construct. The title itself hints at the duality. Namesake refers to the pomegranate, and Blown Away points to its namesake, the grenade, or the other way around. It's a diptych, if you can see that. It's two canvases laid on each other, where one of them is kind of tilted as though it's being moved, like cartoonishly moved. There's a 3D hand grenade. It's hard to see. It's a World War II hand grenade that, by the way, is also known as the pineapple. So I have other pictures where it's likened to a pineapple. It's 3D, and it's a replica, and it's torn. The canvas is torn there, and it comes out. And on the sides of the canvas, which you can't see, I can maybe show you afterwards, there are pomegranates dripping down, seeds. One side of the canvas is expressive style, while the other is a more unfinished mechanical sketch and with some illusion of movement. So I'm trying to convey with here the shifting narrative, the different perspective, the duality of destruction and beauty at the same time, and the fact that they can kind of coexist. I mean, if they exist in our language, but they do create some misunderstanding, they can somehow exist here. And I just wanted to add that the funny thing is that the pomegranate has other really interesting meanings. Example, in Judaism, it has ritualistic significance. In Jewish tradition, the pomegranate is a fruit symbolizing abundance, righteousness, wisdom, and it is said to contain 600 seeds, which as though correspond symbolically to 613 commandments of the Torah. And during the new year, there's a blessing, and it says, "May we be as full of merit as the pomegranate is full of seeds." So this really, even if you don't know this, I mean, it's no big deal. I think the picture talks for itself, the imagery, how these two things conflict, but this adds another layer of the absurdity of how these two things could have been called the same thing. And also, as I mentioned, it's also known as a pineapple grenade. This specific grenade, this model from World War II, and the pineapple is a symbol of hospitality. And in subculture, if you didn't know, it's also the upside down pineapple is a symbol of swingers. So
I have heard that, which I think is very interesting.
yeah,
Effie, I love this series playing on, the etymology of different words and how, something is kind of delicious and wonderful as a pomegranate is the same word as something so destructive and horrendous as a grenade. I think it's a really interesting series to explore because language is so multifaceted and words have so many different meanings. And I know in a lot of your work, you do this, the layering of canvases and a lot of like breaking through the canvases. How did you get the courage, I guess, to do that in your work? Putting holes in canvases is something that can be a difficult thing for an artist to do.
Oh, not at all. I love experimenting, and I have this fixation of showing how things look on the other side. The duality, what we don't know, what we don't see, and kind of that it allows me to stage this layers of this is the back, this is the front, this is a backstory, two stories at the same time. So the layering enables this, and showing the other side of the canvas also allows me to do that.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions for Effie?
First of all, I want to say it's a very nice piece. I think it's such a mess and a good way, the way you're layering over the grenade over the plant. And it's like showing how you have something as beautiful as like a plant, but of the stems comes a grenade. My question to you was, would you think that you were referring to the grenade as a pineapple? And obviously we are calling it a pineapple, but it's not really a pineapple, despite the words that we attribute to it, it might itself identify as a pineapple. Do you think this reflects like trans connotations in your work of how this is a grenade, but we're, calling it a pineapple, even though it's a grenade?
I love your interpretation, and I love when people see things that I didn't mean, but that's the nature of art, is that it's there and you see things. It's a wonderful take. Mine was more about the things that are out of context and misunderstanding, and how you can be talking about one thing and somebody will understand completely something else. And also about the fact that that some words, like it tarnishes for me the pomegranate, the idea that also a weapon is called pomegranate in so many languages. So it's also the effect that something, the duality has on it. But I love your take that, yeah, it certainly does identify this model, this World War II, MK2 it's called, as a pineapple.
Yes, Karen.
So Effie, I have a question. I believe you said the grenade in the background is 3D. Is that a real grenade that you might have gotten at an army store or eBay or something, or is it or did you model it?
Believe me, I tried getting a real one. I really did, but they don't sell them, the duds. This is a plastic one, a toy, from AliExpress or one of those. I did a really long search for it. I knew what I wanted to paint because I actually did something like this in 1996. And I revisited this idea now because of violence and wars and etc. I just I had to show this. So yeah, it's not a real one. It is plastic, but it completely looks like a real thing.
Well, it's just so amazing the way you capture the dichotomy of not only language, but like the feminine, masculine. I think everyone would assert the hand grenade to male, the pomegranate with its fertile seeds to a woman, and it's just a great collaboration.
Thank you. Amazing take. In the background, you can see I have some of the others in the series, and also it's pineapples and things like that. So
thank you. All right. Thank you, Effie. It was so wonderful to chat with you about your work. Congrats on your award.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we are going to speak with Florence. And Florence has 3 different collages in this show. So Florence, if you'd like to start, I have the standoff as the first one, and then I'm staying Adam, and then Spring is in the Air as number 3, but we can go in whatever order you would like.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Ellen. I'm getting a feeling that this show actually reflects you as well as the artists. My work, Red Riding Hood Speaks, is a series of works that I've been doing over a long period of time. And I'm in Wyoming. I will say that early on, I had a dog that was part wolf, and I used to draw her all the time. So although she never acted in any way, shape, or form as my images act here, I do know the physical being of the wolf. Wyoming is a very, very different state from the other states. We're surrounded by animals and nature, and people may have misconceptions about Wyoming. Yes, there are probably, I think I heard 8 men to 1 woman in the state, so it's a very male state. However, we are the first state to allow women the right to vote in 1869. So we're 50 years before any other state did that. Women ran the ranches. And talking about the history of the thing is that one of the ranchers who was a photographer is the one that invented that howling, actually as a coyote at the end of the early Westerns. And he also gave the idea of the cowboy this big start. But in the Wyoming I know, women are very, very strong. And this is actually, he said, she said, which everyone from whatever side has come upon at some time in their working lives. The wolf also came into being in my work as my work is a revisionist Red Riding Hood. Red Riding Hood by Charles Perrault, who wrote it down in the 1700s. It was a cautionary tale for young women at the court of Versailles, not to be by themselves. And I have revised that to mean that the wolf and Red Riding Hood are now living together. They have dealing with interpersonal relationships, societal politics, which affect us all over the world. And certainly in this period of time have become at a very sharp point. And my other and I had, we had bought an old schoolhouse and we had it moved and I wasn't there. The contractor made a mess. And so I painted a picture of a wolf jumping out of the window to expel him. And I had guest artists come to the college where I was teaching, Nancy Azara, and she invited me to show at AIR and in New York. And I did that with these giant 8-foot canvases, which I decided were not the way to go. And I went back to printmaking. But the paintings, which were based on Little Red Riding Hood in sort of an homage to my grandmother, noting grandmother's house being one of the signature paintings. And that won the George and Helen Siegel Award for painting. And then I went on to work with print, which is, let's go to this next print. I'm Staying Atom. There were all these adventures into space by people who do not want to deal with the climate issues of the world. And living in a very rural state, I'm very conscious of what is happening to the earth itself. And so this one, using the prints are Red Riding Hood, and then it's a sheen clay. So sheen clay is collage, but it's put on in reverse, so you can't see what you're doing. And the more pieces you have, it's like this rather agonizing painting. Whereas you can't just paint it out, you have to painstakingly put it together. And of course, I have cats and dogs, and I'm around animals all the time. So here we have Adam happily leaving. And I have thought for a long time that instead of having astronauts, they really need people who do electrical work and plumbing go into space, because that will keep the spacecraft going without problems. So if you want to use the next print, this is my most recent print I did last spring. And when one thinks of spring in Wyoming, because we have very, very, very deep winters, I think of everything I have to do. And my other is thinking about now we can go fishing without ice. So it's just almost comical in this pretense of living together. So I would be happy to entertain any questions that anyone has. either about Wyoming or my work in this series.
Yeah, Florence, I think these are just so interesting. There's so much detail and so many things to discover as you look more and more closely. And I love your repositioning the story of Red Riding Hood in this different way and using it to show kind of both ecological and gender differences and sort of reclaiming Red Riding Hood's power.
Yeah, and I will say, I was very fortunate. One of the ranchers had a trove of magazines above his chicken coop from his grandmother. And so I have magazines starting in the 1920s that I have sacrilegiously cut up and used for my own purposes. It requires that you scan all the imagery, you alter the imagery, you change the imagery. So you either change it before it goes into the computer or during in the computer. And in this instance, it is a lovely gift to have the computer to work with.
Yeah, especially when working with vintage or old magazines or images that if you use them, then they could be gone forever. It's nice to be able to scan them and be able to save them in their original form and then transfer them as well.
Right. And the French version that Perrault wrote in the 1700s is really full of double entendres. And it's a humorous thing as well. And I do think that humor can help us change a lot of things. And I certainly have tried to employ that. I find that what is lacking in the American view of art is that they think to be serious, it can't be humorous. But when you look at, say, Marcel Duchamp, you're looking at someone who was embedded with humor and doing things that were, he found amusing in the making. And I think that sometimes is hard. And I have done work that's so serious and so, about war crimes, et cetera, that makes you cry. And this to me is just pure joy when I make these.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions for Florence or any comments?
I love the fact that so far we've been dealing with this multiple layered view of the world in coming from different aspects.
Yeah, definitely. Dustin.
I love how you use so many different animals as well in your piece and how you use so many different details. My question would be, like, how do you know when to stop with the details? Like, how do you know the piece is like complete? Like, I don't need to add any more.
Well, I think it's a matter of design. You see here, there's a circle that's Red Riding Hood, and then there's a triangle that is the wolf and his orbit. And so it's important that you say everything you need to say, but you want to have acknowledge the viewer. And because I live in a state that has no museum at all within 6 hours. And so people have not seen art, and I want my friends and neighbors to be able to engage in the work. And that's not true of all my work, but in this work, I want them to be able to engage. And of course, I love animals, so that helps.
Okay, great. Thank you, Florence, for sharing your work with us. It's really interesting to see. And thank you, Florence. Let's see. Next, we are going to speak with Karen. Karen, please tell us about your work.
Well, first of all, thank you, Ellen. I'm so excited to be a part of this show. So I am a feminist activist, artist, and curator. I born in Kentucky, got my BFA and and BA in art history at University of Georgia, then moved to New York City and lived there for a really long time. I started my art career actually in the painting and sculpture department at MoMA. But since then, I moved to California about 20 years ago, and I'm now living in a ranch outside of Yosemite. But my artwork, what I do is as both, feminist and activist, I'm always creating text art. I've been really influenced by like Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger. And so not only as a curator, but an artist, I'm looking for art that has a message. So with this particular piece, it was in response to when Kamala Harris was debating Mike Pence and he kept interrupting her. And so it was like that, I'm speaking, so with my work, and I'm always looking to give agency to marginalized voices. So whether it's, I have work on, gun issues, particularly how it affects women and children, immigration, democracy, and, so a lot of these really heavy themes, but then also, I also do a lot of fun work also, and I'll get to like my process here, resin, in a second. So for example, I don't know who knows the song Jenny, if you can see that. This is a little study for a larger piece. So I'll also do work not only, because sometimes you just have to take a break from all the activist subjects, because just as Florence says, it's just like you get so imbued in it that it's hard to keep at that every single day. So I also have a number of series where I'll put my favorite quotes or favorite lyrics from a favorite song into these. A lot of my work is extremely, layered. With this one, this is much, much simpler. So this is all resin. And so what I'll do is I start with a cradle board, or, and I'll create, I have the letter forms. Well, I'll create the letters and, with dyes. And so this piece, for example, probably has 7 layers of resin. And if anyone has worked with that before with epoxy, one, it's really toxic, so you have to be careful, with just the mechanics of it. But it also, like, once you do a pour, there's no going back. So a lot of times my work is slowly at it, because just as a question before, like, how do you know when it's done? With each layer, once it's poured, you can't repair it. So if you put something under that you don't like, you're either going to have to cover it up or just ditch it and start over with a new piece. So again, it's like with so much of my work that I do also as a curator is to elevate people's voices. So to date, I think I've sort of lost count, 50 plus national exhibitions supporting, women and non-binary artists. And also pretty much around 2016, I'm more 80% curator, 20% art, because I'm creating these exhibitions, which actually I include all voices in it for these, political issues of, what we need to address. Because I always think art connects so much on a visceral level. So when you're looking at the work, it hits your heart first before it goes to your mind. And if you can do that and connect with people, I want to, create work that will affect positive social change. I also do a lot of pieces for people if they're interested in, like, their favorite quote, or, so it's like I'm always open to commissions. If somebody has something that they want immortalized in something like this, either for themselves or a gift, it's like, it's just really fun to work with people on like what colors they want and what quote, and and do that.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things that I was struck with when I saw this piece is it's so strong and powerful in its message, and yet the resin, the smoothness of the letters, the font that you chose, the colors that you chose, it is a very muted aesthetic, yet it's perhaps even more powerful because of that. It's not bright red or bright pink, and it's not a giant font. It's not like a sharp finish or a overly textured finish. What are the things that you think about when figuring out what colors or textures to use to kind of accent or go with the message?
Yeah, so often it's like for exhibitions where I, know what like the other artists that are going to be in, if it's a curated show. So it's really depends on the prospectus rather. So for example, I had some pieces, it was in a show that was called here, bleep, F you in the most loving way in San Francisco. And I was invited to be a part of that. So this was a show that was about like anger. And this was, about taking your rage and creating and doing something about it. So rather than just, shaking your fist at squirrels and on the park bench, actually. And so with that, I had a piece called Not Our Kids, which was a statement when all the kids were being put in cages that were at the border. And so like with that piece, a lot of red, a lot of black, very, intense imagery. But with this one, and with other pieces, it really depends on the audience because you want to connect. You don't want to like repel. And I want to talk to both sides of the audience. So like, for example, for a gun show I did that was Deadlocked and Loaded, Disarming America, I actually had some people that were NAR members for their entire life. And when they came through the show and the pieces were beautiful and subtle, so this was actually one that I curated rather than, and we actually had good conversations where they could see the other side of, well, hold it, how do these, mass shootings really affect people in our communities? And so, so to wrap this up, is I really look at who's the audience, who's the target, and then I create the piece specifically for the most impact.
That makes a lot of sense. I love that. Using it to connect and start a conversation as opposed to turning people off. Effie, you have your hand raised. You have a question for Karen?
I have more like a technical question. Or first of all, is it each letter on the wall or is it on the backing? What is the color? It looks like a bit pinkish, or is it nuanced? And how big are they? Because I can't read this small.
The entire piece is put on a wooden cradle board, or another like little secret you can do if you don't have a cradle board, you can use a canvas, but you pour a good layer of epoxy on the back so it won't sag. So these letters are an 1.5 inches tall. So this is a pretty small piece, but I do a lot of work that's up to, I think with epoxy, I don't go much over like 48 by 48 just because the material is so expensive. So I hand tint all of it. And so the letters I'm speaking are actually a hot pink. But then it's like with the cream that goes over it, it softens it. So if you could see a side view, you would see like the intense, the pink, but it's also translucent, whereas like the white creamy color that I have poured over the top is opaque. And was there another question to answer all of your questions?
No, you did. Thank you. Now I can visualize it much better. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always hard to show resin because it looks so flat, but it shines like a mirror. So it's, to see like the side view is usually really helpful.
Yeah, if anyone wants to see more images, you can, I think we have another one on Artsy. If not, you can always visit Karen's website. I'm sure she'll be happy to show you more pictures. All right, thank you, Karen. Let's move on to Darcy.
I'm a New York City-based artist, and I think communication is most likely often ambiguous. This drawing is titled Answering a Question No One Asked, which is a comment on how we communicate or don't communicate with each other. The figures or entities in this drawing can be interpreted as moving towards or away from each other. Their relationship is ambiguous and open to a viewer's interpretation. The circles could be eyes, or they could be buckles on a headband. The shapes could be the back of a head or an abstract being. Many of my paintings and drawings are full of tangles, intersections, knots, and twists, which is a metaphor for mental chatter and actual chatter between people. Conversation can be direct, or it can answer questions no one asked as a way to avoid direct communication. And this is from a series of probably around 40 graphite drawings at this point. This is from the beginning of the series. All of the entities in these drawings are in some kind of relationship with each other, either moving away from towards each other or completely tangled together. And there's also paintings that are part of this series as well.
Yeah, I mean, the tangles that you have drawn are so intricate and beautiful and are really um, evocative of yeah, the outline of people's heads. I mean, I can see a mouth in one area of one. It also has a sense of the brain, like the bumpiness of the brain as well, and just see in the way that they are facing each other, the shapes and the tangles is very conversational, and it really represented to me just how when we are speaking to one another, we don't um, always get the words out the way that we think we did, and the other person doesn't always hear what we're saying. Um, I think it's really beautiful, and there's something really elegant about it as well.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Darcy?
Florence?
Yes. What I love about the piece is that when you start talking to someone and they don't want to listen to you, and they just stop seeing you. And so I think that that's really an interesting way to go about the lack of communication.
It happens. It's magnificent.
Yeah.
It makes me draw a connection a little bit to Effie's work in that with the complications in language and communicating with each other, it's kind of a miracle that we aren't constantly misunderstood, that anyone ever understands what anyone else is saying, because there are so many ways to go wrong when communicating with one another.
Yeah, Darcy, I just wanted to quickly add something. The art, it really illustrates a mental battle for me, like an inner mental battle. Me being a they them non-binary, it's hard. And I don't know what's the right path for me. It's a battle every day from right or wrong. So it really illustrates the tangles within my head. That's what I love about your art.
Thank you. I think about it a lot. I meditate and I notice all the junk in my head, which ranges from something important like who to vote for, or do I want to do my dental flossing now? It's like in your mind, there's everything and nothing.
Yeah, even a lack of identity, as I mentioned, not knowing who you are. It's hard. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Does anyone else have any questions for Darcy? All right, let's move on. Thank you, Darcy. We're going to move on to Stacy.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Stacy.
Thank you so much for including my work in the show with so many other wonderful artists. It's been really inspiring to hear about your work. And I'm a New York City-based artist. I teach at Parsons School of Design, and I also am a fashion journalist for a magazine that focuses on photography. And this particular piece, there's two pieces that are in the show, but this particular one, and actually both of them, stem back from experience I had during the pandemic, which was coming across an old postcard. And the postcard actually in the message was written between a woman and her friend. And it was actually taking place in the 1917 pandemic. And they were discussing, what it was like to be a part of this, very bizarre experience. And it created this kind of portal or this time warp for me, where to see this parallel between 100 years and experiences happening, I began to investigate old photos, specifically cabinet cards. And what you're seeing here is a cabinet card. Cabinet cards were photos that were mounted on very heavy cardstock And they were often given to people as gifts, like a calling card that was meant to be displayed on a dining cabinet in someone's home. So they tend to last longer than the average photo because they are mounted. And they also, if you look at them, they tend to be very specific portraits, such as like a wedding portrait or a graduation portrait, because they are mounted and they're meant to be remembered. And for me, I was thinking about Roland Barthes' book, Count Lucia, where he talks about in the photo the punctum, or that area where the viewer begins to notice a loss or experiences a sense of loss or empathy, yet it wasn't intended by the photographer. And at the time, you know, when you're looking at turn of the century photos, photography was still very rudimentary. People would sit for long, long exposures and they were told not to smile. So often these photos, people look very contemplative, very melancholy. And I began to think about potentially the psychology was what was going on in their mind at the time, in addition to what was the reality of dynamic relationships at the time. So in this particular piece, I'm kind of playing upon the fact that women were really still property. They really did not have their own rights. They were the property of their husband. And you were basically taking a chance at your entire future by trusting someone. In the piece itself, there's a little tiny piece of a leaded glass over the man's face. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a flower. And what it does is it actually takes his eyes and turns two eyes into four eyes. So it creates this sense of duplicitous or duplicity. And that was the idea, is that there is this duality behind somebody that we don't necessarily know what we're getting into. And I wanted to balance that with the weight of a really heavy object, in which case I chose a plumb bob. And these funny little objects, when turned upside down, are just meant to be hung by a string. And once the weight of them makes the string go straight, someone who works in construction can draw that straight line. This was also a rudimentary tool. But when it's turned upside down, it looks like a bullet. It looks very dangerous. It looks like it can pierce. And so I just wanted to take those two worlds of something as beautiful as a wedding, but also as powerful as ownership and the trust aspect of it, and bring these different objects together to begin to kind of tell a potentially dark narrative that is often not represented in these very still controlled photos of, you know, what is supposed to be a perfect environment. And so it's really kind of playing upon the dynamics of relationships, the dynamics of relationships that are still active today, but have always been there, even in the past, even frozen in time 100 years ago. And the next piece, very similar. This would have been something like a graduation portrait of a beautiful woman, very young. But the language shows the vulnerability, that it's quite easy for someone to also at that age begin to trust. And then there was this tarnishing very quickly of someone's reputation if they weren't exactly perfect. And so I also love to write. And so all of a sudden, bringing in language or poetry became an interesting part of adding to the photos. And the language is saying, I did my best. I don't know what to say. I was a fool to trust. With these pressed flowers, which was a very popular pastime at the same time period. Women would press flowers and make elaborate books out of them. So it could be the pressed flowers that were given as a gift by a lover or trying to be courted by somebody that now have kind of taken over, and the story has changed and they've aged and the flowers have passed and the reputation has also been tarnished by this sense of trust. And it just becomes, for me, a bit of both a narrative that I'm making up. Somehow they tend to be dark, even though that's not my nature to be dark. But I think it's that duality of, you know, how do we begin to trust in a world where there is so much potential for our vulnerability to be taken advantage of.
Thank you. Yeah, Stacy, when I was looking at these, I loved that you were, exploring what these photos were originally intended for, and then, what they were supposed to be communicating, and then creating your own narrative, based on sort of our modern day look at these non-smiling photographs, which is, something that we don't do much of today. It's all about smiling or making duck faces for social media, I guess. And yeah, incorporating these other materials to help push forward a narrative, yet still leaving it open to interpretation, that it's not so specific, like, oh, look, this is what exactly you're supposed to feel. But they do have a dark feel to them, which I love. There's a melancholy involved. Debussy, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, first of all, Stacy, your piece, it really touched me because I was actually married very young. And like in the photograph where they're trapped, I felt trapped in my marriage. I felt like I had to adhere to these standards, but I wasn't happy. I wanted to pursue myself, my identity, which led me to leaving my husband and the kids, and just to truly find myself. And even if they weren't accepting with my lifestyle, I just thought it's something I owed to myself. So I really could relate to the photograph and how they're holding on to the pencil, the string to the pencil. I felt like, I had a very brief link to my desires and what I wanted to do in this life, but I was trapped in this photograph. And, the photograph, it's old, so I thought I was going to be trapped for a long time. But thankfully, I was able to reach out, and then hopefully one day I can reconnect with my children.
I hope that for you too. I think it's very brave to have to break past what is a standard in order to find your own truth. And if you don't do it, I think you truly will just implode inside. I think everyone has to live their true life and their authentic life, but it doesn't mean that it's an easy path at all. It's a very brave path. So, I just want to say my total respect for you, because a lot of people do live in silence and they really live in torture because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is interesting looking at the photo from of the married couple, and yeah, like to think she looks so young in this photo. And yeah, you as a woman back then, and even as a human today, getting into a relationship, you don't really know yourself or your partner or how you're going to be in relation to each other sometimes when you get into these situations, and societal expectations and familial desires of what your life will be as a child or brother or sister or any family member can really make you think of having to live your life one way when you hope for living it a different way. So I think that's a really powerful message to get out of these pieces. Does anyone else have any questions for Stacy?
I do.
Go ahead, please.
So Stacy, I love your work, and I have a couple of questions. One, did you write the poetry, I Did My Best, or is that like a found poem that you wanted to incorporate?
It's a good question. This one, I actually, what I would do is I would make rules for myself. I would rip out a page of a book, and I would, from that page, have to cut random words and find, I would call it a found poem. So this I did not write. I found it within a page. But sometimes I actually do write my old poems. I call them old poems because I have two old typewriters. So I will type them out and cut them up, and they'll appear the same, but it actually is something I wrote myself. So it's either one or the other.
Yeah, well, I would say you put it together, so it is yours. I mean, not that it wouldn't matter if you were like quoting like Mary Oliver or something. But another question on your technique, say this one with the roses or with the pendulum piece, are they displayed like in, say, like a shadow box, or do you somehow affix it to a wall, or do you create them and then you're showing rather than like 3D actual items, it's a print of your assemblage?
They're actually individual unique pieces. I haven't made them into prints. Those that are relief, like the one that you're seeing with the flowers, and most of them are these type of reliefs. I will just frame them, have them floating in a frame. But the piece that is the plumb bob is a little bit more unique and a little bit more difficult to frame. So right now it's been almost displayed like a sculptural piece on a shelf, resting against a wall. And I haven't had anyone that has dared to frame that one yet for that reason, because they're so difficult to control, these little plumb bobs. They balance on nothing. But most of them are flat relief pieces.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing, beautiful work. And one more question, if I may. With these photographs, do you just go out to like thrift stores and antique stores, or do you like look for like a whole bunch on like eBay? How do you find those?
Initially, I was finding them in antique stores in upstate New York, and I was surprised by how easy they are to find in antique stores. And sometimes, like during the pandemic, I began to look online as obviously everything was shut down. But it's true, it's not like I randomly grab. I really look for stories and complex dynamics. It could be an expression, it could be that there are things written on the back that gives you a hint about the person or a date or a place. And what's very interesting also about all of these cabinet cards is that not just the photo itself, the printer of the photography studio is always listed on the back, and they often have very beautiful, elaborate etchings of the photo studio advertising it. So it gives you a lot of history, to usually an address, the name of the photo studio, that you can begin to dig, and possibly if there's a name of a person, try to find who this person was. And in some cases, I've actually been able to locate the individual who existed 100 years ago.
Wow, it's gorgeous, fascinating.
Yeah,
Thank
wow,
you so much.
That's amazing. I always wonder when I see bins of these types of images in vintage stores or thrift stores, where the family is today and how they would feel if they knew those photos existed of their, relatives from the past, and how they ended up in this thrift store, not in their, family heirloom chest. This second piece here too, with the words cut out, Erica Baum does a lot of that text-based book, like printed stuff. She doesn't tend to put it quite in the same assemblage way, but if you don't know her work, you should check it out.
How do you spell her last name? I would love to check it out.
It's Erica with a C, and then her last name is Baum, Baum.
Thank you so much. I will.
Sure. Okay, next up we have Jess.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Ellen. Thank you so much for including me in this show, and it's an honor to be amongst all of you amazing, inspiring artists. I am a multimedia artist based in Queens, and I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, which I'm sure you've all heard of. This piece is inspired by the menopausal transition. I started this project. It's part of a larger project called Second Spring, which I began around a year ago. And I started the project with research on menopause, on the ways it's been interpreted and perceived in different cultures, by reading also Darcy Steinke's novel, Flashpoint Diary. And she talks a lot about whales and how they're the only other mammal that lives well past menopause. Obviously, there's other mammals that go through menopause, but they will die quickly after they're not fertile anymore. And it kind of got me thinking a lot about the natural world and how it is a point of inspiration and acceptance and non-judgmental acceptance of natural cycles. Because I was being bombarded with so much so much on my Instagram, right? Once you start looking into menopause on Instagram, it's like nonstop podcasts and you need this and you need to take estrogen and you need to stop this from happening to your life. But it's a natural part of our of being a woman. And I really wanted to delve deeper into that acceptance of it and how do you emerge and find ways to celebrate it. So I also started reading Kate Codrington's work, who's an amazing menopause writer and therapist, and she speaks about menopause in three parts, which is separation, surrender, and emergence. And so where separation is letting go of that's holding you back or that you don't need anymore. Surrender is this point of rest, where you can take time to sit and reflect. And then emergence is when you start receiving what you want to receive. So this human nature one really falls into surrender, and that idea of really letting it happen, and this moment of like quiet rest, and also again like looking to the natural world for those moments that exist throughout any cycle in nature, especially when the natural world is in balance. So yeah, that's where, and then also thinking a lot about the wisdom that comes with age and how that is celebrated in other cultures outside of our more patriarchal society, that seems to really uplift women when they are fertile and sexualized, and not as much when we start losing that, our sexual prowess, I would say.
Thank you, Jess. Yeah, I think this exploration, as any woman who is living recently now, is exploring their menopause journey knows, getting accurate information and about menopause is surprisingly difficult, considering women have been going through it forever, and women are 51% of our population, yet it's very difficult to get accurate information, and people just haven't talked about it as much. So there's that aspect of communication. And I also think your exploration of how we need to listen to nature, to inform some of the things we're thinking about ourselves and our own journeys is really interesting. Describe for us like how are you finding these matching images to or creating them for this series?
Yeah, so for this, I photographed my own, my hair. That is a natural gray streak, very proud of it. And I then created this collage through different images that I took actually out in Joshua Tree, which was so, such an amazingly inspiring, beautiful place. And I just was lucky enough to be there last spring. And so this is me just cutting up. It's a collage. I mean, it's a digital collage, right? So I'm cutting up different parts of different images that I've photographed and then putting it together. Sometimes I have another one with my foot. And for that one, I actually worked with the foot as my base photograph so that I can then layer on top of it and then remove the foot, and it kind of helped me with the shape. Where this one, I was really just looking back and forth. And I've really struggled. I want this to be a series of diptychs, and I've really struggled with finding other body parts that look okay disembodied, that have edges to them. So my plan is to now photograph other women, like ask women parts of their body that they notice were aging maybe before other parts, and continue this. I love the process. It's very new. It's a new process for me. I mostly work in, video projection and more straight photography. So it's been really fun to do more assemblage and challenging.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Jess? Darcy, yes.
I had a comment that sort of loops back. One of the things that could happen after menopause is that women are suddenly invisible. But looping back to an earlier piece, I'm speaking now. And I think those things really kind of communicate with each other. that menopause is perfectly natural. We are not invisible. And I'm speaking now loud and clear.
Thank you. I love that. Yeah, I mean, look at most women in government are middle-aged or older, right? It does take us a while. I mean, a lot of artists too, female artists have this sort of come into their own after they're 50. So, and that could be if you've chosen to have children, the children are older, you finally have time. But also there is this beautiful wisdom that comes from this lack of estrogen. Estrogen has controls us for a very long time. So it's really freeing. And I'd like to turn the conversation towards a more positive view of this stage instead of, oh, poor us, oh, we're losing our beauty, or which is not true, because we're losing estrogen, we're losing our youthfulness. Why can't we just celebrate the wisdom that comes with age, and the community and uplifting each other? I teach also at an all-girls school. So I'm teaching girls who are entering their estrogen super high. They're just entering their most fertile years. And I find it really interesting to have this tension with them. But I would love to see them to stop tearing each other down and just uplift each other more and more. And I keep trying to explain that the patriarchy wins the more you tear each other down. And they just laugh at me, but hopefully it'll sink in.
We can only hope. We can only hope. Okay.
Florence, thank you about your hands. I struggled so much photographing my hands. I've been doing it, but hands are so weird when they're disembodied. That's the problem. But thank you.
I frostbit my hands, and so there are things you hate, but they work for me.
Yeah.
Hardworking, distorted.
Yes. It happens, especially as an artist. Yeah.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Next, we're going to move on to Isabella. And we're going to go back to a different stage of a woman's journey.
Hi, thank you for putting all this together. Yeah, I'm Isabella. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts from University of Wisconsin, and I'm currently getting my MFA from the Savannah College of Art and Design. So I'm based in Savannah at the moment. Most of my work in general talks about the kind of perceived disconnect between legislation that is curated by men and the subsequent harmful implications from that, and all the interconnected systems of control that permeate our sensations, and kind of focusing on the imperativeness of telling these stories, especially in this time, and being explicit and trying to stay away from timid art. That was a lot of what was happening when I was making the pieces like this one. I talk a lot about the interplay of excess political control and gender dynamics and kind of lived experiences combined with psychological effects. The brushstrokes in a lot of my work resemble raw muscle and meat. And especially in kind of the works I'm making more so now, I kind of dismember and rearrange bodies. That kind of just is a conversation of reframing any reproducing body as a sum of all parts instead of just a vessel, because the conversation around being a vessel, the pendulum kind of swings, and it's very much in that stage right now where that's kind of an expectation, and kind of watching the political landscape right now. And I work in a lot of disciplines. I work in painting, sculpture, installation, performance art. I have some activist work and performance that kind of transcends the corporeal into disrupting our surroundings, which serves as a critique of the systems in place, legal system in relation to bodily autonomy of all forms of bodies, and the systems or lack thereof of support systems of care. I talk about that in some of my interdisciplinary works. But in the works such as this one and the ones I'm doing now, where things are more disjointed and reassembled. I work with like challenging perceptions of objection, while also considering who creates those perceptions, who has the power to create those perceptions that become the collective mind. And despite like this just being a normal part of life for many people, that are capable of reproducing in general, and kind of the disjointed way that we conduct life and manage life in the current state of everything. A lot of my work discusses kind of that disjointedness in relation to the information age, the overwhelm of information, and how you define self and distangle everything, like finding self in relation to that kind of overwhelming authority that we all are aware of. So that's what this piece and a lot of my other work focuses on. So
thank you. Yeah, this is, I mean, such a powerful piece, as we have learned in recent years, and I suppose we always knew there are many people who don't actually understand how a woman's body functions or works, and it's important to portray and communicate the reality of what life is like for people who can reproduce and who have monthly periods. And I think there's something really the juxtaposition between kind of your like old masters brushstroke style and the visceralness of this image. It works really well together. It's a really beautiful piece in so many ways, and yet it's showing something that many people would not consider to be beautiful, even though people think of women being able to reproduce and give birth as one of life's miracles. Yet nobody wants to actually see the reality of what that is. Does anybody have any questions for Isabella or comments about this work? Karen, yes.
I do. So, Isabella, I just think this is such an incredibly strong and powerful piece. And I want two questions. Is it part of a series? And also, like, when have you gotten any pushback or censorship from trying to, show this work?
It's from kind of my first year of grad school and the work I was making in that first year, which was this past year. I just started my second year, so it's not necessarily like in a series, but it's kind of just what I was processing at that time. It's kind of made a little bit of a shift into my second year, but yeah, I know for the censorship question, of course, it's apparent like digitally, obviously, but also in applications for various things. And my school thankfully handles things very well. They're very supportive of me, which I appreciate, especially because moving to the South, you ruffle some feathers with this type of work. So I'm really appreciative of that. But yeah, I mean, that's why I'm like appreciative to be a part of this show and other shows that through galleries that are accepting of this work and willing to have a space for conversations and nuance. So
yeah, I just think it's just so amazing. Both your painting is just sublime, and it reminds me a bit, and I encourage you to check this exhibition out. I mean, it was a couple years ago, but it was called Paint Made Flesh, and it was in Washington, D.C. at the Phillips, I think. But anyway, Paint Made Flesh. And so when I look at this, it just reminds, it's because it's visceral, but it's also it draws you in and you can't stop looking at it. I just think it's beautiful, but like it makes me think of the huge paintings by Jenny Saville. But I think you would love to look at the work that was also included in that exhibition. It's I think you'll like it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Let's see. Thank you, Isabella. We look forward to seeing more work from you in the future. Next, we're going to move on to G. And G asked me to read a statement from them first. It's fairly long, so I'm going to start, and then I'll ask if anybody has any questions in the middle, and then I can read some more. So this work is called Invisible Prison. And Invisible Prison is a core installation featuring a transparent box symbolizing the latent constraints within societal norms, familial expectations, and gender roles. Though seemingly intangible, these restrictions function like a cage, confining individual identity and freedom of expression. The transparent box creates a paradoxical scenario of being visible yet inescapable, where the audience can perceive the constraints but neither touch nor break free from them. The work aims to reveal how these unseen limitations infiltrate our lives, shaping individual behavior and social dynamics. G says, the inspiration for Invisible Prison stems from my reflections on family, gender, and social power structures. The transparent box serves as a powerful metaphor for the invisible pressures faced by men and women in society. For men, society often imposes the expectation of being strong, demanding they suppress vulnerability and emotions while striving for socially defined success and authority. These expectations form an invisible framework, symbolized by the transparent box, a metaphorical cage where freedom seems possible but is perpetually out of reach due to rigid societal labels. For women, the transparent box highlights the rigid expectations surrounding appearance, behavior, and roles. From traditional ideas of gentleness and virtue to modern demands for perfection in both appearance and motherhood, women exist in a seemingly open space, yet constantly feel the weight of societal scrutiny. This individual control restricts their ability to break free from gender roles and achieve authentic self-expression. These gendered constraints rarely manifest overtly, but are enforced through unspoken social rules, familial traditions, and collective memory. By visualizing these invisible yet omnipresent structures, Invisible Prison examines how societal pressures silently oppress individuals. The He Said, She Said exhibition explores differences in gendered perspectives and the power dynamics embedded within narratives. Invisible Prison directly responds to this theme through its symbolic design of the transparent box. The work reflects the implicit constraints of gender roles, that society's expectations for women are not only distinct, but often oppositional, creating profound internal conflicts within individuals. That, for me, resonates a lot about that internal conflict, about trying to manage that we have to have one gender inside of us, which I don't think is true for anyone, and that it is such a societal constraint that we are putting on ourselves and that are not actual true in reality. Let's see, G says, as an artist, my practice explores the intricate relationships between familial expectations, emotional expression, and societal norms. Through personal introspection and social critique, I aim to uncover the conflicts and contradictions concealed beneath the surface of societal order. My work often centers on individual experiences and identity, employing symbolic materials and metaphorical forms to challenge conventional perceptions. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Florence, yes.
These are very tiny in scale. Is it 3.5 inches?
Yes, it's 3.5 by 11.5, I think.
Composite is 11. So very, very delicate and fragile.
Yes, very small. And it's so simple and yet so powerful at the same time. Yeah, I was really struck by this piece when it came in for the submissions. Let me move on to the next person, who is Dustin. Dustin, please tell me about, tell us all.
Hi, how are you? Yes, I'm excited to be here. My name is Dustin, and I am a photographer, and I create work about being queer and trans. A lot of my work is self-portraiture, and it's just me documenting a lot of my experiences on hormone therapy and how that's changing my body, how that's changing the way that I present myself, and how that kind of reflects with how I feel about myself on the inside. So the piece that I made, it's called Male Hormone, and it's about when I started taking testosterone around 2 or 3 years ago. I believe it's from 2021, I think, is when I took that photo, or 2022. But I took that when I started taking testosterone, and it was like an actual like account of an experience that I had trying to pick up my testosterone prescription. Went in there, hey, I'm here to pick up my testosterone prescription. And as usual, it was not available for me the day I needed it. And the pharmacist was talking to another pharmacist about it. And they're like, what is she waiting for? Oh, she needs her testosterone. And I didn't say anything at the time, because I'm not the type of person who's like confrontational or whatever. But when I got home, I made that piece of art about it because I just thought a lot about how appearance affects the way that we're gendered so heavily. Like, it doesn't matter. I could literally be taking the male hormone and you still think I look like a girl. And so you're just going to assume my pronouns are she, her, and not even think about it.
Yeah, your photography, I think, is really great, and I love how you're documenting your life through it and creating really powerful imagery about your experience that I think, connects and makes it real for other people to really understand what's going on for so many people who are being misgendered and not respected in the way that you deserve to be. How do you feel about putting your art out into the world when you have experiences like that where you're misgendered or don't feel like you're being accepted?
Well, I think it's important. I think that it needs to be said, especially with the way things are going today. They want to take away access to trans healthcare, especially for trans kids and for trans women. I think that it's so important that we actually have actual trans experiences and trans narratives about what's actually going on with the trans healthcare.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions for Dustin or comments on his work?
I had to say, Dustin, I just love this work. It's so strong, and not only just like looking at the image compositionally, it's amazing, but just kudos to you, and I really hope that you get to show your work all across the country because it is so needed and it is so important to be seen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Darcy, you have your hand raised as well.
I did. I just think that having art by trans people about their experiences in this very possibly dark period is incredibly important to make art, share your experience, and be very loud.
From a
Thank
design,
you.
Dustin, I love the juxtaposition of the red and the green. That contrast is wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dustin. Right. Next, we have Jessamine.
Well, my name's Jessamine Plotz, and I'm an artist and I'm a professor at Texas State University in San Marcos, Texas. I teach in the art department. And thank you for hosting this show and this artist talk. This piece, Paparazzi 2, came from this work that I've been doing for the last couple of years. That's actually it's maybe in a bit of opposition to what has been shared by most participants, which is it's basically an idea of abandoning identity. I feel that I've been making art for my whole life. And as I went through my education, I felt like I was kind of pigeonholed, honestly, I found myself like feeling like I had to make work about my identity. And eventually it became stifling to me. And I find a lot of power just in the art object and feel that the art object can be transcendent without my identity. And I've actually come to find that I have to dissociate from my identity and totally abandon it in a way to feel really free. And this work, it's part of several bodies of work that I've been making over the past couple of years that are about self-annihilation kind of. So instead of representing myself over and over again, I thought there's this process that I think a lot of us go through where we in the social media age and an age where we're just so exposed to like tons of pop culture images, we not only are encouraged to focus so intently on our identities that everything else becomes unimportant, but also we see our identities and define our identities through people in the media. So I went through all these people in the media who I feel like, you know, I'm a white woman and I'm cisgendered and I'm straight, for the most part, kind of bisexual, you know, whatever. I've been so many things at so many different times. I change all the time. And there are these certain people who I feel like I see myself through and other people see me through. So I started to represent them over and over and over again. And one of the people that I represent myself through over and over and over again is Anya Taylor-Joy. But the idea, this is who this is in the piece. The idea is that I would go through this process of representing self through other people to the point that I lose myself. And there's this kind of annihilation that happens, which is, I feel like, what happens when I'm making work a lot of the time. So this is like a, you know, it's like a single piece, but usually when I show these pieces, they're in these large arrays where there's like so many images of these other people and sometimes mixed with like self-portraiture that the identity is completely lost. And over time, these images have started to evolve into like, they're not abstractions because they don't totally abandon illusionism or the picture plane, but they are less and less recognizable. And I'm just seeing where this takes me, because I do feel that philosophically I have to get away from the need to speak about my own experience and my work. That's how I feel right now. I know many other artists who feel really differently, but yeah, that's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all have about that process.
Thank you, Jessamine. Yeah, I was really struck by this piece and the idea of paparazzi and looking, you know, from defining ourselves and other people in relationship to people we see in the media, and how we think we know people that are famous because of we see them in movies or on podcasts and TV talk shows, but we actually don't know them at all. And this the confusion that arises by social media and other media and having this relationship with people in a way that is very one-sided, and it's a conversation that is not really accurate, and yet we think we know what we're talking about when we talk about people or portray them. Dustin, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I think that the perspective in this piece is what makes it really beautiful as well. There's the voyeurism, the idea of that you painted it that it's being watched by the paparazzi. But then when we look at it, like say we're in a gallery space and it's on the wall, it's almost like we're watching them too. We're partaking in the watching of these people who aren't consenting to their photo being taken. So I think that that's a very interesting perspective.
Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, definitely. The idea of who is watching is important to me, not necessarily because I'm especially interested in anymore the idea of me being watched or even a marginalized body being watched or oppressed, because I think, I mean, that's a huge problem. Of course, it's a huge problem for that to be the case, but what I'm trying to do with these works, and they really do make more sense when you see them in these large arrays, but I'm trying to complicate the idea of just what an individual is in the first place, because I'm representing this person as myself, then sort of, but that's not really apparent to anybody. So like, who is it actually that we're looking at? And does it matter so much who it is that we're looking at or who's looking? And if that, like, what would matter if that didn't matter as much?
One more person to get to, Jocelyn, who was unable to be with us here today, but she did record something, so I'm going to try to play it now.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Elizabeth. I'm a painter, writer, and mom based north of Boston, Mass. I'm really interested in exploring what it means to be alive and how we can live differently and better alongside the earth and each other. This painting, Lost in Translation, is part of my Open to Interpretation series, which explores the ways in which we handle conflict and communicate, or don't, with those around us, and the impact that has on our personal emotional landscapes. In a culture where many of us are too busy to actually look inward and be honest with ourselves, I think it's that much harder to be honest with each other. And whether with those closest to us or strangers, when we don't communicate, we're leaving it open to interpretation. This particular piece reflects the way communication can be misinterpreted and continue to shift over time as memories fade. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today to take any questions. Please feel free to ask any questions you have through Ellen if you'd like more information about this piece, and I would love to get back to you. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, great. That was Jocelyn talking about her piece. And what I liked about this and both the first piece of Nicole's that we started with is that it's an abstract representation of what we've been talking about, which is at the core of the he said, she said thing, which is that you can interpret things in so many different ways. There are so many different perspectives, and there's so much layering of information, and their communication can become so challenging with all of those different aspects coming together. Let's see, Darcy, do you have something to say about Jocelyn's piece?
I just wanted to say that everyone has different responses to artwork from their own perspective, and I think it's very important to be respectful and kind to all voices, including queer, trans, or however someone wishes to identify themselves. And this is from a cisgendered white woman. I just was very upset by hearing those comments, and I wanted to make it clear that in my world, all the voices are welcome, including the nasty ones, but I'd prefer to see the nice ones.
Thank you, Darcy. I think that, these conversations about gender and the trans experience are very complicated, and people have very strong feelings about them and are very protective of people who are trying to share their authentic experiences. And we're all on edge, I think, because of the recent political events, Supreme Court cases, presidential elections, and trying to make sure that we're protecting people from being called out in ways that they don't deserve to be. So I think everyone here respects everyone's point of view and just wants to make sure that everyone's being given the respect that they deserve. So thank you all for participating. Does anyone have anything to say about Jocelyn's art?
I think titles are so important, and seeing that one, it just makes me laugh, but in like a good, positive way. It's that, and it really sort of wraps around into what we've been talking about the last couple of minutes of lost in translation, because how sometimes you just blub up and you say words that you can't believe they came out of your mouth, but that's not what you really feel. So that lost in translation, I think, is a really great thing to end with, that just to say we really need to listen to each other and also give people a chance to explain what they said. Just that never happens anymore. You say one sentence and then it's like tattooed across your forehead for so I'm just asking, or I'm just saying that I think lost in translation is just so powerful.
Absolutely. Dustin, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I wanted to say about Jocelyn's work, I really adore the color scheme of it. I think that the light pinks and the light blues, it's just very dreamlike. And then I love the corner of it, just that darker plum violet color, having the contrast between those two really light candy color and then the darker color. It's really nicely done.
Yeah, the composition of this piece is just really beautiful. It's soothing, and then I think with the title, it makes you ask questions about, what has been lost in translation. So it's really great. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We're a little bit over time, but I appreciate everyone sticking around till we got to the end of all of the art. There are a few more artists in the show who weren't able to join us today, so you can check out their work online at artsy.net. And just thank you for joining us and supporting artists. If you have any questions about this exhibition or Amos Eno in general, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to help. I'm going to drop my email address in the chat in case anyone would like to email me with questions. So thank you all so much, and I hope you all have an amazing holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Have a great evening, Saturday night, everybody.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.